Blood is thicker than water, but greed poisons the well. My parents stole my six-figure inheritance to fund my sister's extravagant lifestyle, leaving me with absolutely nothing. They told me to just get over it. So I did. I built an empire, and then I locked them out forever. In my family, there were two distinct realities. There was the reality my younger sister Camilla lived in a world of private ballet lessons, designer prom dresses, and a brand new convertible on her 16th birthday. Then there was my reality. I was the independent one, which was my parents' code word for the child they didn't have to worry about and therefore didn't have to invest in. My parents, Richard and Margaret Jennings, weren't incredibly wealthy, but they were comfortably upper middle class. Yet every spare dime they had was funneled directly into the bottomless pit of Camilla's self-esteem. If Camilla sneezed, my mother bought her a puppy to feel better. If I made the dean's list, my father would offer a distracted pat on the back without looking up from his newspaper. I learned early on that my worth in the Jennings household was tied entirely to my invisibility. I worked part-time at a local diner throughout high school just to buy my own clothes, while Camilla complained that her monthly allowance wasn't enough to cover her manicures. The only person who truly saw me was my grandpa Albert. Albert was my dad's father, a gruff blue-collar mechanic who had built a successful auto repair business from the ground up in East Nashville. While my parents turned up their noses at the grease permanently embedded in his knuckles, I idolized him. I spent my weekends at his shop, handing him wrenches and learning the value of a hard-earned dollar. He taught me about compound interest, about the importance of owning land, and, most importantly, about standing on my own 2 feet. "Harper," he would tell me, wiping his hands on a greasy rag, his eyes sharp and kind, "your parents are raising a peacock and a hawk. Peacocks look pretty, but they can survive a winter. Hawks know how to hunt. You're my hawk." Hate. When I was 20, Grandpa Albert passed away suddenly from a massive heart attack. It shattered my world. At the reading of the will, the family dynamic was on full display. My parents expected to inherit everything. Instead, Albert, knowing exactly how his son and daughter-in-law operated, had structured his estate meticulously. To Camilla, he left $100,000 in cash. It was a generous gift, but one he privately told me she would likely blow through in a year. To me, he left the deed to the East Nashville auto shop and the plot of land it sat on. The area was rapidly gentrifying. The business itself had been closed for a year due to his failing health, but the land, a prime half-acre commercial lot, was independently appraised at just over $450,000. It was my golden ticket. Because I was only 20, the property was placed in a temporary trust until my 21st birthday, with my father Richard named as the trustee. Albert had assumed his own son wouldn't betray his flesh and blood. It was the only miscalculation my grandfather ever made. For the first 6 months, everything seemed fine. I was away at college, working 2 jobs to pay my tuition, because my parents had drained my college fund to send Camilla to a ridiculously expensive fashion institute in Paris, a program she dropped out of after 3 months. True to Albert's prediction, Camilla's $100,000 evaporated. She used it to backpack across Europe, buy a wardrobe of Chanel bags, and secure a luxury apartment downtown that she couldn't afford to maintain. Worse, she brought home a fiancé, Bradley Sterling. Bradley was a smooth-talking entrepreneur whose primary skill was spending other people's money. He wore tailored suits and constantly talked about his crypto investments, yet he somehow never picked up a dinner tab. By the time my 21st birthday was 3 months away, Camilla and Bradley were engaged, and Camilla was demanding a 200-color wedding to match her personal brand. Furthermore, Bradley had convinced her that they needed a $300 down payment for a McMansion in the suburbs. My parents, tapped out from years of indulging Camilla, were panicking. Camilla was throwing daily tantrums, threatening to elope and cut them out of her life if she didn't get the fairy tale she deserved. Nash and hoax. Oh, worry. I had no idea that while I was studying for my final exams and planning what to do with Grandpa's property, my parents and a sleazy family lawyer named Mr. Abernathy were sitting in a mahogany-panelled office, quietly selling my future. I found out on a rainy Tuesday in late October. I'd driven down to Nashville for the weekend to check on the property. I'd spent months drawing up a business plan. I was going to leverage the land to secure a commercial loan, tear down the dilapidated garage, and build a mixed-use retail space. I had architectural sketches, zoning permits in the works, and a fire in my belly. When I pulled up to the lot, my heart stopped. The chain-link fence was gone. The old familiar brick garage where I had spent half my childhood was reduced to a pile of rubble, and standing proudly on the freshly cleared dirt was a massive glossy sign. Future home of the Sterling Heights condominiums. I couldn't breathe. I scrambled out of my car, the rain soaking my hair, and called my father. It went straight to voicemail. I called Mr. Abernathy. His secretary put me on hold for 10 minutes before telling me he was out of town. Panic clawing at my throat, I drove 3 hours straight to my parents' house. I didn't knock. I barged through the front door. My parents were sitting in the living room, sipping wine with Camilla and Bradley. They were surrounded by glossy wedding magazines and fabric swatches. "What did you do?" I screamed, my voice cracking, dripping wet onto my mother's pristine Persian rug. The room went dead silent. Bradley smirked and looked down at his phone. Camilla rolled her eyes. My father stood up, adjusting his glasses, looking more annoyed than guilty. "Harper, keep your voice down," Richard said coldly. "We were going to tell you this weekend." "Tell me what? That my grandfather's garage is bulldozed? That someone else's name is on my land? How did you sell it?" My mother, Margaret, stood up, putting on her best wounded bird face. "Harper, please try to understand. You're so smart, so capable. You have a bright future ahead of you. But your sister, Camilla, is sensitive. She's starting a life with Bradley. They needed capital for the wedding and the house. Your father, as the trustee, made a fiduciary decision to liquidate the asset for the benefit of the family." "The family." I laughed, a hysterical, broken sound. "You mean for her? Grandpa left that to me." "He wasn't thinking clearly at the end," my father lied smoothly. "He meant to distribute his assets equally." Camilla ran out of her portion. "It was only fair. We sold the lot to a developer for $400,000. It's done. And where is the money?" I demanded, tears streaming down my face. "Even if you sold it, that money belongs to the trust." "It belongs to me." My father sighed, the sound of a man burdened by an unreasonable child. "We advanced it to Camilla and Bradley as an early wedding gift. Legal fees and taxes took a chunk, of course. We've left $10,000 in your account. That should be plenty to help you with your senior year. Be reasonable, Harper. You always figure things out." Now, they had stolen $390,000 from me because I was under 21, and because my father had broad discretionary power over the trust. He had exploited a legal gray area, claiming the sale was necessary for family preservation and debt management. By the time I could have hired a lawyer to sue him for breach of fiduciary duty, the money was gone, spent on non-refundable wedding deposits, a down payment on Camilla's house, and Bradley's business debts. Suing them would mean years in court, thousands in legal fees I didn't have, and squeezing blood from a stone. I looked at my mother, who wouldn't meet my eyes. I looked at Camilla, who was buffing her nails, completely unbothered by the fact that she had just cannibalized my future. "You are dead to me," I whispered. The absolute finality in my voice made my father flinch. "All of you." Enjoy the wedding, because it's the last milestone of hers you'll ever have me for." I walked out the door and never looked back. The next few years were a living hell of my own making. I took that $10,000, rented a tiny, roach-infested studio apartment, and dropped out of college. I didn't have time for a degree anymore. I had a score to settle. The sheer blinding rage of their betrayal became my fuel. I woke up angry. I went to sleep angry. I took a job as a junior assistant at a boutique commercial real estate firm in Atlanta, working 80-hour weeks. I did the grunt work no one else wanted to do. I analyzed market trends until my eyes bled. I learned how developers thought, how zoning boards operated, and how money moved. That's where I met Simon Caldwell. Simon was a senior partner, a brilliant but eccentric investor who noticed that I was the first one in the office at 5 a.m. and the last one to leave at 10 p.m. Simon had an idea for a proprietary software, a prop tech platform that used AI to identify undervalued commercial properties in rapidly expanding urban sectors before they hit the open market. He had the money. He needed someone with the relentless drive to build it and run the operations. "I need a shark," Simon told me over cheap coffee one morning. "Someone who is hungry enough to eat glass to get to the finish line." "I don't just want to eat glass, Simon," I told him, looking him dead in the eye. "I want to own the factory that makes it." And we partnered up. For 5 years, I didn't take a vacation. I didn't date. I barely slept. We built Aura Analytics from a 2-person operation in a rented WeWork space into a massive enterprise. I poured every ounce of my grandfather's work ethic into that company, and it paid off beyond my wildest dreams. By the time I was 27, Aura Analytics was handling portfolios for some of the biggest real estate developers in the country. We were acquired by a major private equity firm for $30 million. As a 40% equity partner, I walked away with an 8-figure payout. I invested my millions right back into commercial real estate, building a massive, diversified portfolio that generated passive income that made my grandfather's original lodge look like pocket change. I bought a sprawling gated estate in the Buckhead neighborhood of Atlanta. I drove a Porsche. I wore tailored suits that would make Bradley Sterling weep with envy. I had made 10 times what my parents had stolen from me, and I had done it entirely on my own. Meanwhile, I kept tabs on the family through a burner social media account. Karma, it turns out, is a notoriously slow but incredibly precise archer. Camilla's extravagant wedding had been beautiful, but the marriage was a disaster. Bradley's crypto investments had tanked, and his business turned out to be a thinly veiled Ponzi scheme. He blew through the rest of the stolen money within 2 years. To keep up appearances, Camilla started a luxury event planning business that bled money because she hired her friends, overpaid for inventory, and refused to actually work. To save Camilla's house from foreclosure, my parents had to take out a second mortgage on their own home. Then a third. My father delayed his retirement. My mother started selling her jewelry. They were drowning in the very debt they had sacrificed me to avoid. I watched it all happen from afar, sipping champagne on my balcony, feeling absolutely nothing for them. Then the inevitable happened. The money completely ran out, the creditors came calling, and my parents suddenly remembered they had an independent daughter. 7 years had passed since the day I stood dripping wet in my parents' living room and severed all ties. In those 7 years, I had transformed from a heartbroken, cheated college student into a formidable force in the commercial real estate sector. My company was thriving, my investments were yielding astronomical returns, and my life was a meticulously curated sanctuary of peace and luxury. I hadn't spoken a single word to Richard, Margaret, or Camilla until a crisp Tuesday morning in November, when my executive assistant, a razor-sharp woman named Beatrice, walked into my corner office with a strange expression on her face. "Harper," Beatrice said, holding a sleek tablet. "There are 3 people in the lobby demanding to see you. They bypassed security by waiting behind a delivery driver. They claim to be your parents and your sister. A cold spike of adrenaline hit my chest, quickly replaced by a profound icy calm. I had known this day would come. Like clockwork, parasites always return when they sense a fresh host. "Send them up to conference room B," I instructed, not looking up from my laptop. "Make them wait 15 minutes. And Beatrice, only offer them tap water." When I finally pushed open the heavy glass doors of the conference room, the sight before me was almost pitiful. Almost. My father Richard, once a man who prided himself on his tailored golf polos and country club tan, looked grey and deflated. His suit was visibly dated and hung loosely on his frame. My mother, Margaret, clutched a knockoff designer handbag, her face tight with poorly executed fillers and overwhelming stress. And then there was Camilla. The golden child looked haggard. Her platinum blonde hair showed dark roots, and the diamond ring she used to flaunt was conspicuously absent from her left hand. They stopped mid-argument when I walked in. I took my time, smoothing the skirt of my Tom Ford suit, and sat at the head of the long mahogany table. I didn't offer a greeting. I just looked at them, letting the silence stretch until it became suffocating. "Harper," my mother gasped, breaking first. She attempted a fragile, trembling smile. "Oh, sweetheart, look at you. You look so successful." "Margaret," I replied, my voice completely devoid of emotion. "To what do I owe this intrusion? My security team usually handles trespassers, but I was curious." My father cleared his throat, trying to summon the old, authoritative patriarch persona that used to terrify me. It didn't work anymore. He just looked like a tired old man. "Harper, there's no need for hostility. We're family. We've come because we need to talk. We need your help." "Family?" I raised a single eyebrow. "That's a fascinating word choice. Last time we spoke, you liquidated my inheritance to fund a wedding for a man who turned out to be a con artist. So let's skip the pleasantries. What do you want?" Camilla slammed her hands on the table, her eyes flashing with the same old entitlement. "You don't have to be such a witch about it. Bradley made some bad investments, okay? It's not his fault the market crashed. Bradley is facing 3 counts of federal wire fraud, Camilla." I corrected her smoothly, having kept tabs on the public court filings out of pure entertainment. "He defrauded investors out of $2 million. He's looking at 5 to 10 years in federal prison. That's not a market crash. That's a felony." My parents winced. They clearly hadn't expected me to know the details. That's why we're here," my father mumbled, looking at the floor. "Radley's bail is set at $500,000. Furthermore, his defense attorney requires a $200,000 retainer. Camilla's house was already seized by the bank. Your mother and we put our own house up as collateral for a high-interest bridge loan 2 years ago to keep Camilla's event planning business afloat. A business that went bankrupt 6 months ago," I added, steepling my fingers. "Yes," my mother sobbed, burying her face in her hands. "Harper, the lender, is calling in the loan. If we don't pay them by the end of the month, they are foreclosing on our house. We will be out on the street. Camilla has nowhere to go. We have nothing left." Richard looked up, trying to make eye contact, trying to find the desperate-for-approval daughter he had discarded years ago. "We read about your company's acquisition in the Wall Street Journal. We know you have money, Harper. More money than you could ever need. You can write a check right now and save your family. It's the right thing to do. You got lucky, and it's time to pay it forward." I stared at him. The sheer, unadulterated audacity was breathtaking. They hadn't come to apologize. They hadn't come to make amends. They had come to the ATM they thought they had birthed, demanding a withdrawal. I leaned forward, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Let me get this straight. You stole $390,000 from me. You bulldozed my grandfather's legacy. You told me to figure it out with 10 grand to my name. And now, because you set yourselves on fire to keep Camilla warm, You want me to pour my hard-earned millions over you to put it out. We raised you, Camilla shrieked, her face turning red. You owe us. You wouldn't have any of this if it wasn't for the drive Dad instilled in you. I actually laughed. It was a cold, sharp sound that echoed off the glass walls. Oh, Camilla, the only thing Dad instilled in me was the absolute certainty that if I didn't save myself, you people would bleed me dry. I didn't get lucky, Richard. I worked 80-hour weeks while you three played house with stolen money. I built an empire on the ashes of what you took from me. I stood up, signaling that the meeting was over. I won't give you a single dime, I said softly, looking each of them in the eye. Not for Bradley's bail, not for Camilla's debts, and certainly not for your mortgage. You made your bed with your golden child. Now you get to sleep in it, even if it's on the street. My mother fell to her knees, wailing. My father cursed at me, calling me a heartless, ungrateful wretch. Camilla threw a glass of water at the wall, shattering it. I didn't blink. I simply pressed a button on my smartwatch. 30 seconds later, 2 burly security guards entered the room. Escort these people out of the building, I ordered, and if they ever set foot on the premises again, have them arrested for trespassing. I watched them being physically guided out of the room, their shouts fading down the hallway. I felt no guilt. I felt absolutely nothing but the profound satisfaction of a closed circle. But the truth was, I wasn't quite finished. I am not a naturally vindictive person, but I am a businesswoman. And in business, you never leave a loose end. After my family was escorted from my building, I immediately called my lead corporate attorney, a ruthless, brilliant man named Grayson Pierce. Grayson, I said as soon as he picked up, I need you to look into a private bridge loan issued to Richard and Margaret Jennings in Nashville. Find out who holds the paper. I want to buy their debt. It took Grayson exactly 48 hours to track it down. My parents, in their absolute desperation to keep Camilla living in luxury, hadn't gone to a traditional bank. They had gone to a predatory, hard money lender, a private equity group called Vanguard Capital. The terms of the loan were borderline extortionate, and my parents had defaulted 3 months ago. Vanguard had already initiated foreclosure proceedings on my parents' sprawling 5-bedroom estate. Vanguard is looking to offload the bad debt to free up capital before the end of the fiscal year, Grayson informed me over the phone. They're putting the property up for a private foreclosure auction next Wednesday. The opening bid covers the outstanding loan balance, $850,000. Buy it, I said without hesitation. Use my private shell company, Albert's Legacy Holdings, LLC. Pay in cash. Expedite the closing. I want the deed in my hands by the end of the month. But not consider it done, Grayson replied, a hint of amusement in his voice. He knew my history. He knew exactly what this meant. Over the next 3 weeks, my parents lived in a state of ignorant bliss, assuming the bank's silence meant they had bought more time. They didn't know that Vanguard Capital no longer owned their home. They didn't know that Albert's Legacy Holdings was now the sole title holder of the property. By the first week of December, Bradley had been officially indicted and, unable to post bail, was sitting in a federal holding facility. Camilla had moved back into her childhood bedroom at my parents' house, weeping daily about her ruined life. And then the notice arrived. Not a notice of intent to foreclose. A formal, legally binding notice to vacate. The property had been sold. The new owner was taking immediate possession, and they had exactly 72 hours to remove their belongings from the premises, or they would be seized. I know exactly how it played out because I was sitting in a black SUV parked down the street on the morning of their eviction. At 8 a.m. sharp on a freezing Tuesday, 2 local sheriff's deputies pulled into my parents' driveway, accompanied by a locksmith and my attorney, Grayson. I watched through tinted windows as my father burst out of the front door in his bathrobe, his face purple with rage, waving a stack of papers at the deputies. I watched my mother stumble out onto the porch, catching her chest, while Camilla screamed at the locksmith who was already drilling into the custom oak front door. They were frantic, claiming there was a mistake, begging for a few more days, demanding to speak to whoever owned this Albert's Legacy company. That was my cue. I stepped out of the SUV. The crisp winter air hit my face, sharp and invigorating. I wore a tailored, camel-colored trench coat and carried a single manila folder. The clicking of my heels on the frosted concrete of their grand driveway was the only sound I heard as I approached the porch. As I walked up, my father saw me first. His eyes widened in utter disbelief. Then my mother saw me, and her mouth dropped open in horror. Camilla just stood there, paralyzed. "Harper?" My father breathed, looking from me to Grayson, then back to me. What are you doing here?" "Did you come to help us?" "I told you, Richard, I don't give handouts," I said, my voice carrying clearly over the frigid morning air. I handed the manila folder to Grayson, who opened it to display the newly minted deed. "Mr. and Mrs. Doubly Jennings," Grayson said professionally. "I represent the owner of Albert's Legacy Holdings, LLC. My client holds the exclusive title to this property. You are currently trespassing." The realization hit them like a physical blow. The color entirely drained from my father's face. He staggered back, touching the porch railing to keep from collapsing. "You," he whispered, his voice cracking. "You bought our house? You're evicting your own parents." "Not that bad, sure. You sold my grandfather's legacy out from under me to pay for a scam artist's wedding," I replied, my gaze unwavering, locking onto his terrified eyes. "You bulldoze my future. I'm just changing the locks on yours." "Harper, please," my mother shrieked, dropping to her knees on the frozen porch, reaching out for the hem of my coat. I took a step back, refusing to let her touch me. "It's Christmas. Where will we go?" "We have no money. Please, you can't do this to us." "You have 72 hours to get your things out," I said coldly, looking down at the woman who had always treated me like a ghost. "If you're not gone by Friday, I will have your belongings thrown into a dumpster. Have a happy holiday, Margaret." I turned my back on them and walked away. I didn't look back as Camilla started screaming obscenities at me, or as my father broke down in loud, racking sobs. The sound of the locksmith snapping the new deadbolt into place echoed behind me, loud and final. The karma was absolute. Today my parents and Camilla live in a cramped 2-bedroom apartment in a run-down part of the city. Richard, well past retirement age, had to take a job as a greeter at a big box hardware store just to pay their rent. Margaret works part-time at a dry cleaner. Bradley was sentenced to 7 years in federal prison, and Camilla, unable to cope with being a broke, single woman with no marketable skills, spends her days arguing with strangers on the internet, bitter and utterly alone. As for the house, I didn't even keep it. I had my development team flip the property, tear down the outdated mansion, and subdivide the massive lot. We built 4 stunning, modern luxury townhomes on the land. I sold 3 for a massive profit and kept the 4th as an investment product. I named the development Albert's Court. Sometimes people ask me if I ever feel guilty about what I did. If I ever miss my family, the truth is, I don't. Blood might be thicker than water, but loyalty is the only currency that matters to me now. My parents taught me the ultimate lesson in ruthlessness. They just didn't expect me to become a better student than they were. I lost a toxic family, but I gained the world. And the best part? I hold all the keys. Family betrayal cuts the deepest, but living your best life is the ultimate revenge. Harper turned her heartbreak into a multi-million-dollar empire and delivered the perfect, hard-hitting karma her parents deserve. Have you ever had to cut off toxic family members to protect your peace? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more dramatic real-life revenge stories.